Yeah. No, well, actually, I was going to ask you, uh, how long do you write a day when you're working? And a bigger question is what do you do about the eye strain? When I'm looking at the computer, it's like, oh my gosh, I got to stop for a while.
Well, two different questions. Um, I write 40 weeks a year, and I write from about 8:30 in the morning till about 2:30 in the afternoon. So I write about 5 hours. And the first hour will be reviewing the previous couple of days of work and then making any cleanup that's necessary there before I even jump into anything new. And I normally, if I have the outline and my characters, and I'm old fashioned in that I put my characters just on old 3x5 cards. That's my description of characters that fit behind that one page outline. Um, and I can finish a book in about, once I sit down and have all the research done, I can knock a book out in about 6 months. But sometimes it'll take 2 years of research to sit down and start the book. Um, and as far as the eye strain goes,
Yeah.
these things saved my life. They're computer glasses, tinted blue, to get rid of all of the eye strain in my terminal. And that's the only way I survive. And I've learned to take really good care of my eyes. I'm a pilot,
Yeah.
and I'm a pilot in his 70s, and I don't want to quit flying. So I try everything I can to stay in as good a shape as I can.
Yeah.
And that's especially my eyes. And I started off when I was in, my passion for flying began in the Navy. And going through my first Navy flight physical, I had 12, 15, 20, I had 12, 15, 15, 15 vision, which is almost perfect. And um, that, but I have had a tremendous aversion. For 20 years, I refused to wear sunglasses except when I was flying. And I developed cataracts in my eyes, and it almost cost me my flying career.
Oh,
So after that, I began listening to my eye doctors as opposed to just going to my eye doctors. And about 15 years ago, my docs got me on these blue tint glasses, and it has made a huge difference.
you know what? I'm gonna go out and get some today because that, sometimes I just don't feel like writing because, of the eye strain. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so thank you for that.
You're
But
welcome. When we were chatting earlier, we were talking about your time doing video work in The Hague for the United Nations. Can you be more, help me understand more about what that work actually entailed, and what kinds of things you were doing there and for what kinds of groups?
okay, so I was working for the United Nations, and it was the first tribunal, I believe, in The Hague, and it was called the International Criminal Court for the former Yugoslavia. And I think that popped up on people's radar when Slobodan Milosevic was apprehended and brought to The Hague for his trial. And if you think about the comparisons would be what I did would be like a modern day version of Nuremberg. Um, the Balkan War between Croatia and Serbia and Bosnia. They had the war, and when you're a war criminal, it's not just because you were in the war; it's because you did very bad things during the war, and so they brought in these people, the accused, and my job would be to uh, record every single day, every session for I think 35 different countries on live television, the courtroom proceedings. So the audience, I shouldn't say audience, but the viewers were the families of the victims. And my role, what I wanted to do as a video director, I would run cameras, all six cameras remotely, and I would direct, switch. I would do everything because they didn't want too many people to reveal sensitive documents, protected witnesses, closed session materials. So we had to keep it tight. So we didn't have any camera people, that sort of thing. We did it all ourselves. And in courtroom one, I would sit directly behind the accused. There was nothing but like a glass window, like 2 inches, 3 inches away from me. So they would come in, Slobodan Milosevic, um, General Mladic would come in and they'd wave, and I would just sort of like, I didn't want to acknowledge them too much because I was in the middle of the road, but I would record uh, and live television of the judges and the courtroom procedures. That could be documents, that could be eyewitness testimony, it could be families, and sometimes it was very gruesome. We had many experiences where family members would come in and say that their uh, spouses or their children, had been killed, and you feel really bad about that. And then they would go on to say their entire families, another 10, 15
Mhm.
people were killed. So if you think about what I did, it would be the equivalent of the Nuremberg trials.
Mhm.
And so I would see these people standing trial and see their reactions. And I wanted to break it down to where if you didn't know anything about law, such as the accused in Bosnia is sitting home, I wanted to do it so I would tell a story that they could understand it. If you didn't know law, I would go by facial reactions of the accused or the prosecutors or the judges and tell a story to break it down to those people who lost their families. That was my role. And as my last assignment, um, it was the Perlich case, and that's when General Pralag stood up, and while he was being accused, he actually downed a vial of cyanide, and he died in the courtroom. And that was my last assignment for the Hague, in the Hague for the United Nations of the International Criminal Court. For
What
the
a great end for a book sometime.
It was out of all the years of my directing, um, that was something that put it all together to test myself of telling this story properly. And from what I heard, that the International Criminal Court is now using that footage to, in case it happens again, what to do. But I just went by instinct of what I should do at that particular moment, where the courtroom became a crime scene.
You touched on something that I think about all the time in my writing. You spend a lot of time watching people who have done really evil things,
Yes.
and in my personal experience, some of the most evil people I have ever met were also among the most charming people I have ever met.
Yes.
And, and um, I one of the things I'm really trying to do in my books is I'm just like I'm not really big on superheroes. I'm also not very big on people who are just evil and you have no idea why they're just evil.
Mhm.
I try to develop the, my the characters that you would call evil in my books, so you understand who they are, where they come from,
Yes.
and I think that helps a lot in understanding, why the plot works and why it's important that the book or the issue that needs to be dealt with is important. And I like books that make you stop and think. And
Yeah.
one of the things that I would have been fascinated by in doing what you did. I'm not sure I could have been as neutral an observer as you were. Because somewhere along the line, I would have really wanted to figure out what the hell got these guys off into things that would allow them to be the kind of monsters that they turned into.
I agree. I agree. And as far as I'm not going to mention names, but some of they are they are complex characters, like
Mm-hmm.
narcissist, basically.
Mm-hmm.
They Sometimes I would see them signing autographs, or writing postcards for people, because and again, they weren't sentenced, they weren't found guilty at that point.
Mm-hmm.
But I found it very interesting that most of them thought they were going home,
Mm-hmm.
and most of them didn't. But they just thought they were the best. They didn't see that they were doing evil. At least they didn't seem to show that in the courtroom. But they just thought they were superstars, or some of them thought they were superstars, and there's a few of them are spending life sentences now. So they weren't exactly, they shouldn't have packed their bags thinking they were going home. But very
Yeah.
complex characters.
And, and fascinating characters. I mean, when I was working in Russia, I had a number of engagements, we'll put it that way, with people who were part of the Russian mafia. And they were some of the most brutal people I've ever met in my entire life. But to go out and have dinner with them, they were utterly charming. They never picked up a tab, by the way, ever. Um, but but to sit and have a conversation with them and talk about their dogs and their kids and their dachas and their love of, for example, sailboats, or I mean, it would be like any other really charming friend you would ever want to go out with. And I found that by trying to get to know them on that kind of level, I could work with them, even though I didn't want anything to do with them. But but in some of the environments that I was in, they were so powerful that you have one of two choices. You could either turn around and put your tail between your legs and run, or you could try to do the good work you were trying to do, um, and keep them from interfering with it, or worse, jacking up the price so high on what you were trying to do in the kickbacks they demanded that you just couldn't do it.
Yeah. Boy, yeah. I didn't realize that you were with the Russian mafia. Now that's a book.
Um, it's part of a book that I've got coming out in July. I include some Russian mafia in it. Um, I've come to realize that most of those guys were just spoiled brats that were able to get away with it until they couldn't, and then they ran.
Yes. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Go
There
ahead.
it's no, it's what I saw was these were bullies, that I'm not going to say all of them, but I saw a great percentage of the accused were bullies.
Yeah.
And they thought they could get away with it.